I've learned that in this journey of building and in this journey of raising money, that if you ask small, you will get small.
Yeah.
And if you ask big,
Yeah.
you will get big.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to
Yeah.
ask.
Don't be afraid to ask. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eye of Africa. I am your host, Aina Fadina. Today, we are in Brooklyn, New York, talking to Daniel Acheampong, the general partner of Visible Hands. Visible Hands is a venture capital firm on a mission to highlight and invest in the limitless potential of overlooked founders. At the early stages of building a company, Visible Hands provides meaningful funding, personalized support, and social capital, helping founders to build exceptional technology startups. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's so wonderful to be here, Aina. Thank you.
And what does it feel like to be in Brooklyn, New York, where you're, well, not where you're from, but where you grew up?
This is home. I love Brooklyn. So I was born in Ghana. I grew up in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. But I got to Brooklyn because my dad wanted to take that, the journey to pursue the American dream. And he came to the U.S. first, and then brought my mom, and then later brought me and my siblings. I'm one of 5. And I remember first coming to Brooklyn, when the fresh kid from Africa, and you're like, whoa, this is dope. This is where Biggie grew up, where the music is. So Brooklyn has been a special place for my growth, my development, and my journey as an entrepreneur and as a learner.
And if you think about your experience as a Ghanaian kid moving to Brooklyn and moving to America, can you speak to what that experience was like as a young immigrant through your own lens?
Yeah, as a young immigrant, it was new. There was a lot of curiosity to figure out, how do I navigate this? My older siblings, because they were a little bit older, I think they were able to navigate it a little bit with more comfort and flexibility. But for me, it was a shock. I remember when I went to the basketball courts, right? And I wanted to make some new friends. And the kids in the neighborhood, they were like, you can't play with us. And I was like, what you mean? And they're like, well, you're the new kid on the block. You're African and you're darker than everybody else. And I was like, wait, what? We're all black kids. All right. But then, so that was kind of the first exposure to learn about the differences and the perception of color of sorts. And I remember that day I made it my mission. I was like, I am going to become the best basketball player on this court. I did not become the best basketball player on the court, but it gave me something to aspire to. And I would wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, 6 a.m. in the morning, just like running up and down the building, the stairs that I lived on. And I became pretty good. And it just taught me the experiences of when you put your mind to something, you work at it, you could become very good.
And one thing I try to pay homage to is, especially being an immigrant, our parents.
Yes.
Who, leave for various reasons.
Yeah.
And seeing them just having to start their life all over again. Can you tell me what it was like to grow up in a household and seeing the life of your parents change right before your eyes?
Yeah.
And what values that they exhibited that's also brought you to where you are today in life?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to talking about my parents, I always have to give them enough time, right? Because I think even the risk that my parents took at that time in their life to come to this country, I mean, they were in their 30s, like early 30s. And I'm 33 right now. And if somebody were to come to me and say, leave everything that you have, leave your family behind, go to a country that you barely speak the language, you have no money, and you're going to crash at with somebody that you barely know, and you have to figure it out. Like, I would say, hell no. There's no way I'll take that risk. But that's what my dad did, and that's what my mom did as well. So the confidence to take that risk, I think, is quite impressive and also inspiring. I asked my dad the other day, why did he do it though? And his response to me was, so that my kids could have a better education. So that was his guiding light, and he was willing to sacrifice a lot. So my parents they've been such an important inspiration. I think they're the hardest working people that I know.
Yeah.
Something that I've developed it to my own life, that my dad every morning, he would wake up, he would be up really, really early, around 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and he would be out the house by 5:30. And he always was go on his knees and pray before he left. Um, and as a kid, I remember I would see him like on his knees, and I was like, as a kid, you don't really do those things. But now as an adult, I reflect on that, and I literally go on my knees every morning just to say thank you before I head out the house.
And I think it's also a story of like obviously spirituality,
Yeah.
gratitude, giving thanks. Because we don't know. There are a lot of things that we don't know, but that centering of whether it's spirituality or religion, it's really just what keeps you going when you don't know what's next. And you
Yes.
just keep hoping.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And knowing that everything is going to be okay almost. I remember in college, my mom would send me text messages almost every day. And my mom's way of saying I love you is God be with you. Um, so now me thinking and reflecting upon those words is kind of a way to feel that sense of love.
Yeah. So when you think about your father's goals and why he moved to this country, and fast forward to the man that you are today,
Yeah.
you achieved his vision and you achieved his goals. Tell us how that feels, knowing that I did it.
You know, my I my dad, for him, I think the sense of education, for me, I realized that it wasn't that big of a deal in a sense of where he wanted us to go, but for him, it was a big deal. And it was demonstrated. There was a point in high school, I was getting an award for some kind of, participation, all the things that we do in high school. And my dad came to check out the ceremony, and they called my name, and I had to give like a 5-minute presentation. And he was bawling. He was bawling. And I rarely see my dad cry, but this was in high school. So I think in that moment, I was like, oh, that's the dream for him. And it's been really inspiring. Like my dad, you can get in any trouble, similar to my mom, you can get in the worst trouble in the world. But if they saw you reading a book, they would just leave you alone. Even if you're not reading, they'll just leave you alone. So that sense of education has been always strong in my household. And for me, it's been an escape, that curiosity to figure out, how does the world work? How do people interact? What are some of the things that are moving our life and our ecosystem? So for me, there's always been an interesting curiosity, and I want to learn from people who've done it and have done it well. Like I wouldn't have been able to go to college without a scholarship. So when Posse stepped in, my mom, who was a nurse, my dad was a janitor, Posse became that avenue. And so through Posse, I went to Brandeis, and I was fortunate to have worked at Goldman, recruited to Goldman from Brandeis. And I worked at a private equity firm called Summit Partners. And then that Summit Partners really began to think about, how do we leverage venture and entrepreneurship to support founders? And I took that almost through an academic kind of rigorous process, where I went to Wharton for my MBA and Harvard for policy. And through those moments, really began to work with my partners and my friends to build the foundations of Visible Hands, what we're doing now here.
Jay, when did the idea for Visible Hands start? And then with the fundraising process start?
Yeah. So October 2019 is really when we began to experiment with visible as the structure that we chose. But before even that, my partners and I were working on different companies, and then those led to learnings and iteration, but also truly identifying the problem. To the point I mentioned earlier that we were just obsessed with the problem, and it happened that visible hand became the solution that we identified. But it was a journey. It was a journey for going out to raise capital. In so October 2019, we got this idea and began to work on it and spend more time. But in 2020 was when COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I was still in graduate school, and my other partner, Justin was just about getting ready to leave his full-time job, and Yasmin was working on a political campaign. So we were all doing different things, and Justin and I, we really started working on the kind of the early execution of Visible Hands with other members, and we almost didn't do it because the world was tanking. I mean, I had all my savings at the time in the public markets. So look at that, it's the stock market going down. I'm about to graduate.
Yeah.
And I was like, job market was top. And I was like, let's get a job.
Yeah.
And in fact, I went to the company that had given me an internship the previous summer to talk about that. But Yasmin, their co-founder, she was like, guys, we have to do this. Because if we don't, so many ideas will die. So many entrepreneurs wouldn't even be given the chance. So we said, you know what, let's go build. And we went out to build Visible Hands. But it was really difficult. When we first started sharing the ideas with people, we had in total, we had over 400 plus meetings to raise $10.5 million fund. So just imagine the amount of no's that you hear from 400. And that just made us resilient in the process that this is an important problem. It doesn't matter how many no's we hear, we're knocking at the door. And the other thing to add is that those no's actually help us keep iterate and keep improving and refining our pitch. There were moments that we would be pitching an investor, and one of us will be editing the document in the back end, and then you refresh it on Google, right? So by the time you get to the slide, that new thing is there. So it was just constant work, constant iteration, and truly believing in what we were doing and getting the right people on board. But it takes time.
Yeah. And then, the murder of George Floyd, I think activated and showed the world about this huge gap in this space. And a lot of commitments were made by corporations and with individuals.
Absolutely. It was huge. The murder of George Floyd, it was huge. In fact, before George Floyd, there were several things that happened around that time with Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
And it's just several situations. And for me, sitting in class as a graduate student, there was so much emotions that were going through my mind. And I think that was one of the reasons why I felt so compelled to actually go and take on this mission with me and my partners, because I just saw it as something bigger than myself. So it was huge for me, but I think it also became an important visual to the world about the challenges that Black folks go through, like Black men go through. I remember for Ahmaud Arbery's situation when it happened, I worked out a lot, and that, for about a month, I was so reluctant to go outside to run, and I would work out early in the morning or late at night. And I was like, if it happened to this Black guy in a place where he should have been safe, I don't want to go and run outside.
And they don't see your degrees. They don't see anything. They just see
exactly. They don't see those degrees that I'm at Harvard or I'm at Wharton. In fact, when I was in high school, at college at Brandeis, had an experience where I was president of the student government, and I was running out one of those nights, and there were a group of students when they saw me they saw me running towards them, you know, you can feel the tension. And they immediately crossed the street, but then they kept on looking at me as if I was a threat to them. And I was like, you all have no idea. I am the president
Yeah.
of the university student government. And if it was lighter outside,
Yeah.
I don't think they would react that way. So in those moments, I wonder, is it because of me being a black man,
Mhm.
or is it at night and
Yeah.
people are scared? But nevertheless, even to have that thought,
Yeah.
right, is a discomfort.
Yeah.
So around that time with what happened with George Floyd, I think it became an important exposure to the challenges that black men go through and then black people experience. Um, and then also it was the context of COVID. So people were home
Yeah.
and watching this. So I think that gave this feeling that something had to be done. So I think people opened up their wallets more. More conversations were happening, and that helped us in actually helping people understand why we were doing what we were doing, how we were doing what we were doing. One of the challenges that I talk about here, I know with some of my teammates, is I hope that this is not just a blip in history,
Yeah.
and then people forget and revert to the mean. That there's always a reversion to
Yeah.
the mean, but I hope that the level at which the reversion will happen will actually be accelerated.
Yeah.
Will move up.
I think that's sort of one of the concerns I have for emerging fund managers who raise
Yeah.
capital over the last 2 or 3 years. We're seeing what's happening with the economy now. People are closing shop and pulling back on sort of investing in different asset classes, especially venture, is quite risky.
Yeah.
So how, for someone like you guys who are now going on to raise your second fund,
Yeah.
what sort of concerns do you have about that? Or you can only control what you can't control at the end of the day?
Absolutely. I think, it's you have to perform
Yeah.
and execute. And we've been really fortunate, right? We have an excellent team and we back some incredible founders who are showing that when you back diverse team, it actually works.
Yeah.
We have, for example, I'll give an example. We backed a group of black women, and it's 4 black women, 2 MIT computer science PhD students, 2 Wharton MBAs, and they're building a company called Parfait.
Perfect. Yeah.
Now, for us, we were like, and when I first met them, and I was hearing about what they were building and the challenges that they were going through. I said to myself, wait, if you were to take away that they were black women and that they're women,
Mm.
and you said, I have 4 people here. 2 of them are computer science PhD students in computer vision. 2 of them are Wharton MBAs, from background working in Amazon and all these really impressive tech companies. And they have the capabilities to build this computer vision product that allows people to purchase this product. Would you invest in them? The chances are it will be a yes. But then when you layer on, you say, oh, they're women and they're black women, the responses change, and that didn't make sense to me. So we were one of the first institutional investors to back this team, and they are crushing. They're crushing
You're
it.
killing it.
They recently raised a $5 million seed round with Serena Ventures and Upfront as some of the lead investors in there. So for us, the talent is
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
and we're excited to be backing them.
Yeah. Through your lens,
Yeah.
what does it mean to dream?
Mm.
What does it mean to build? And what does it mean to back?
I think it's important to feel what's in your heart and allow yourself the space to explore that, whatever that creativity is. I was reading a biography about Albert Einstein, and he loved to sit by himself, just like sit in quiet and just dream. And he talks about imagination and how powerful imagination is. In fact, you think about the theory of relativity. Relativity is truly a concept of imagination, right? That led Einstein to figuring out how relativity works. So I think dreaming is that. that giving yourself the time to let imagination just flow. But a dream that's just sitting there is just a dream.
Yeah.
And in fact, I say this, and this might be, a hot topic, and I'm sure people might disagree with me, but I believe that the value of an idea is zero, that there's no value in the idea. But the execution of the idea is what creates value.
Yeah.
And that's what I consider the building.
Yeah.
That to build, you have to execute. How do I, put this pen, and write this? How do I get this wheel to connect this thing so that it can move? You have to figure out the different tools and different things that makes it connect. Otherwise, if you say I'm going to build a car, there's just a car in your head is not a car.
Yeah.
You have to put it together.
To back.
And then to back, I think to back is hope. To believe in something, or someone to believe in you.
Yeah.
And I think that also translates in you believing in someone. As an entrepreneur, I have people who back me, my investors, my LPs who back me, and that means the world, because there's a hope there that I can help achieve and create something of value. And that is something that we can't take for granted. And it's the same thing that, we do with our entrepreneurs. In fact, if I roll it even back, it takes me back to my relationship with my nephews and my nieces. When I tell them how proud I am of them, that it doesn't matter what they do, I will always love them, that my love will be a backing for them. They hold on to that. And I think that's what backing is, that you feel the sense of love, that somebody's cheering you on and pushing you forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So entrepreneurship can be a very lonely ride.
Yeah.
What role how do you find a community to help you through? Because as a GP, you're an entrepreneur as well.
Absolutely.
So how do you find community to find support in getting you from 0 to 0.1 to 0.2 to then get to like the exponential inflection point to get to 1?
Yeah. I think part of finding community is to also know that you are probably not the first one to do this. So for us, I said, I want to stand on the shoulder of giants, people who've done it before me. So we put in the work to identify who they were, reach out to them and say, hey, we're doing this. What are some of the things that we should look out for? One of the OGs that I love calling out, who's been incredibly helpful to me and my partners, is Charles Hudson from Precursor. I began stalking Charles and just hitting him up on Twitter and just reaching out. And he was so helpful. In fact, at the ending of last year, we had about an hour session with him and just shared our vision and some of the challenges that we were going through, and say, hey, Charles, how do we think about this? And it was just incredible.
Yeah.
So by having people who've gone before us to help set some of those frameworks have been really helpful. And then, being vulnerable with others who are not only have gone before us, but others who are in the market as we are. I had a call with Brian Hollins from Collide Capital yesterday. I hit up Henry from Harlem Capital, or Jared from Harlem Capital. Like they've become friends and collaborators that we have to rely and support each other through this building process. Because we have to do it together and expand this access of resources and such. But entrepreneurship is a lonely journey.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have done at Visible Hands, in fact, it was so core to what we were building, is that you can't just give people money and say, that's it. Go figure it out. Because that's not sustainable. And actually that's valuable, but it's only to a point.
Yeah.
True value comes in community. Then it becomes cyclical, and they begin to tap into this, and they say, yeah, I spoke to this person, you speak to this person,
Yeah.
I had this random thing. Like, they share information and resources that becomes so valuable. What we do at Visible Hand is saying that you are already excellent. How can we bring our resources to help push that even further? So the community becomes a key driving force
Yeah.
of the work that we do.
So we know the numbers around sort of diverse founders, and we know the statistics on women.
Yeah.
And women are the ones who are making most of the decisions that are made in the household.
Yeah.
But why is that important to build an ecosystem with the nurturing nature and essence that women have?
Absolutely. Women make up half of the world, right? Women have the fastest growing rate of entrepreneurship generally. And if you dive deeper into that, Black women have the fastest growth rate of entrepreneurship. But yet you look at the numbers, as you mentioned, women get less than 10%. Black women get less than 1%. So a fraction of 1%. So then you look at just even comparing on a relative basis, it doesn't make sense. So we believe that when you highlight and invest in the limitless potential of women, of diverse founders, is not just a good thing to do, it's actually important for the economy. Is important for innovation. So there's so much being left on the table because of the way that the traditional way of investing has happened. So we believe it's just a missed opportunity. So just truly imagine what the world will look like if we backed more women, if we backed more diverse founders. It will look incredible.
So when you thought about raising the first fund, who did you call up that said, I will give you X amount for this fund? Because, I call this a Friends, Family, and Fools Fund, the FFF fund.
Yes.
And then, there are people who are like high net worth individuals, there are foundations. Like, how do you even get access?
Yeah, I really believe in this concept that your net worth is your network, or your network becomes your net worth. It's so important to expand it, because if you live in a small context, in a small network, it becomes very hard to ask someone to say, hey, I have this dream and I see this problem and I have a solution. Can you support me? So I've been fortunate to have been in circles and places where people have the money, they have the resources to say, I'm gonna support you to do that. So who do you call? Frankly, my partners and I, we got together and we said, who are all the influential, successful people that we know? And who are all the people that could actually help us think through this problem? So it wasn't just people who could give us money. And I think that's where sometimes people make that mistake. It's important that somebody could write you a check, but is that who cares about the problem enough to do so? And we began having those meetings. Some of the people, before I even asked them for a penny, I told them about this problem and said, what do you think of this? Like, you've built an incredible business, or you've built great, an investment firm that's been around for 50 plus years. How would you think about this differently? So after a while, they go through the exercise and the iterations with you. They're like, they feel like they're part of the journey and they're more than willing to write a check. So that has to be a combination of certainly who can bring the resource, but also who cares about the problem.
Because then that means that they care for the next round that you have to raise. And then they're
Absolutely.
willing to make introductions to other people on your behalf as well, too.
Yes. And I'll also add, Ina, is that don't be afraid to ask. And ask for what you need. I've learned that in this journey of building and in this journey of raising money, that if you ask small, you will get small. And if you ask big, you will get big. So don't be afraid to ask.
Don't be afraid to ask. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What about being African is important to you? Why is it important to identify and say, I am an African man?
Yeah.
I'm a Black man.
Yeah.
I'm an American. I'm a Ghanaian.
Yeah. I think I am a combination of all those things. That I am African, who happen to have lived an American experience. So like African American within that context. But I love my roots as a Ghanaian. I went to Ghana to truly visit, in 2019, and I've visited in the past, but when you go, you spend time with family, and you just stay home in the family's compound or whatever it is. But I was able to explore my country, and I saw how beautiful Ghana was, and the water, the forest, and I just really got to explore. And then I went to Cape Coast,
Oh, yeah.
and I saw the history, of the slave trade and how tough and emotional that experience was. I read this book called Homegoing.
Yeah.
That book was incredible, incredible. And it talked about the context of, two sisters who were split, at some point in life, where one happened to, get traded into slavery and ended up in the US, and one stayed in Ghana. And it outlines their journey together, over the years and throughout their generation. And for me, I felt like lived almost dual lives. And it was also empowering to see the beauty that's being created through, tough history. So I'm so proud of my culture, my heritage. I'm Ghanaian. My last name, Acheampong, my father tells me that it means chief, it means king. So I'm like, I revel in that.
Yeah.
I'm super proud of my heritage.
And I think the great thing that we're seeing now, which I feel like every episode we kind of touch on the intersectionality of like the Black African experience and the diaspora and what we're seeing now, because once upon a time, there were insecurities about being African.
Yeah.
And I think now, just thank God for the internet and social media and, just this need to connect to something. When I see the Black American experience and the way we relish of the cultural intersectionality that we're operating today, from music to food to art to fashion to VC, it's just, and that sort of culture and commerce coming together globally.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just, it's
Yeah. I think, I credit for me, my parents a lot with ensuring that we were so close to our roots.
Yeah.
Like we spoke Tree at home. It was a balance of Tree and English. So I speak Tree fluently. My mom wanted to make sure that we ate African food, so those were things that my parents wanted to ensure that we never forgot where we came from.
Yeah. No, it's so there's a lot of innovation on the continent. VC in Africa is huge. Do you guys invest in African startups? And what are your thoughts around what's happening from like the VC ecosystem on the continent and opportunities in Africa?
For me, as a venture capitalist, I get excited about Africa, and we're not necessarily, in fact, we've invested in companies who are operating in Africa, although our investments have to be entities in the US. They can operate all around the country, all around the world, and we've invested in companies who are operating in Africa, and I get so excited about it. I visited Kenya and Ethiopia, and just seeing the work and the tech innovation there. In Nigeria and Ghana, there's so much cool things. Now, I think there's also a lot of work that needs to be done in building an actual infrastructure where pension funds, fund to funds, large pools of capital can actually go and make these meaningful investments, not, $500K here, $1 million here, but like investing billions of dollars to drive innovation and support innovation in Africa.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Eye of Africa. I am your host, Aina Fadina. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your words, your inspiration, and the vision behind your purpose. And until the next one, take care.